Welcome to the ARD battle. Nationwide ceasefire or NCA is going to be signed. The date is being set on the 9th of September. So it seems to me that it's going to happen this time. But there is a long process, even to sign a paper, a ceasefire agreement. Why taking so long? What is the process? What went wrong? Can you share your opinion?
Well, they sometimes refer to this as a peace process. But it's a misnomer. They're not talking about peace. They're talking about the technicalities of a ceasefire agreement. I mean, normally a ceasefire can be announced just like that. They start shooting at each other.
They will stop shooting.
Yes. Then you sit down, you talk, you reach a consensus, you sign an agreement on political issues. But here they're putting the cart before the horse.
Right.
And they want to talk about an agreement before they even discussed any political issues. That's not going to work.
So even the starting point is all wrong.
Yes, the whole concept is wrong. And let's say that they agree to sign this thing. Is it really going to lead to even a ceasefire? Well, very crucial point here is that the exact details about how the ceasefire should be implemented and monitored on the ground will be discussed after the signed agreement, not before. So this is just going to lead to more conflict. I cannot see how this could possibly lead to any lasting peace in the country.
But you said that this is going to lead to more conflict. What do you expect? What do you foresee after signing a NCA ceasefire agreement? Some are fear that it will be same as before, or some people are expecting that there will be more fighting will break out in somewhere in the north and some areas.
There can be more fighting in all parts of the country, and there can also be severe problems between those who sign a ceasefire agreement in a certain ethnic group and those who are opposed to it. Look at the KNU, for instance, where some of the leaders would like to sign this agreement, whereas some other people in the movement are against it. So you're going to have splits and infighting as well as conflicts between the government and the ethnic groups. You will end up with a horrible mess.
But this ceasefire again, it's not all-inclusive. People are talking about inclusive, but Aung San Suu Kyi endorsed this NCA, but it won't be all-inclusive.
Of course not. And it's wrong to call it a nationwide ceasefire agreement when it doesn't cover the whole nation. I mean, you have groups in Shan State which are excluded from the whole process, like the Palang, the Kokang. The WA may sign it and then say, okay.
They will be separate.
Well, that's not clear, but let's say that they do sign this agreement. For the WA, it just means that, okay, that's it. No, leave us alone for another 10, 20 years. We can manage ourselves. As we've done since we entered into the ceasefire agreement with the government in 1989, Mr. WA did. One has to remember that this whole idea about ceasefires is nothing new. There was in the late 80s, early 90s that the government entered into ceasefire deals with about 20
That's right.
armed resistance groups.
Yes.
Now the whole idea has been revived. The only thing that's different this time is that they want everyone to sign this agreement once again, and you have a whole machinery of foreign peacemakers getting involved in this whole process. And I call it the peace industry.
Peace industry. Before going to that area, before we tackle this department about peace industries, and I'd like to also, it's quite intriguing to see the President Thein Sein government, former general. He was, or they were very eager to sign this ceasefire agreement before the election. It's more like, to me, it's more like a ceremonial thing. But there are also foreign embassies and the Western governments and donors, communities are very much excited and so optimistic, full of optimism. And those, including those peacemakers and comments that you one time mentioned in your article. Why there's euphoria about this signing a ceasefire, and what is behind it?
One can expect that President Thein Sein's government would like to finish this before the election so they can leave behind a legacy of not re-establish peace in the country. But also, I think they do believe that if they can get a ceasefire agreement, or even if it is not really a nationwide ceasefire agreement, before the election, it would strengthen their chances of doing quite well in the elections, because they think they would get a lot of kudos and support from the general public that, oh, this guy's achieved something. So that's certainly a factor. And a third factor is, of course, let's say that this government is not in power next year.
Right.
Then what will happen? And another government may be much more critical of the whole process and have a different approach. So therefore they're eager to wrap it up as soon as possible before the elections are held in
But Aung San Suu Kyi endorsed it now.
Well, she's told them not to rush into it, I understand.
Right.
But what she actually knows about the negotiations and what's going on, which issues have been discussed and so on, I really don't know. But on the other hand, as you said, there's also the foreign diplomatic community.
That's right, and donor communities.
And the donor community. When they're putting immense pressure on the various ethnic armed organizations to sign this agreement. And I think that it's totally shameful. First of all, they shouldn't interfere in this process. It's not their business. And moreover, I don't think they understand the complexity.
You mean the complexity on the ground?
Yes, the complexity on the ground. And I would actually single out here the ambassador of Norway, whose behavior has been absolutely shameful. He's running around talking to this representative of ethnic peoples, telling them, you better sign this now, you better sign this now. And what does she understand of 30, 40, 50 years of ethnic conflict in Burma? Nothing.
And aside from Norway, what about UN and other Swiss and donor countries?
Sure.
Seems to be allegedly, to put it politely, siding with the government and the Myanmar Peace Center.
Yes, they are. As you know, the European Union, of which Norway is not a member, is actually the main financier.
EU, yes.
EU is the main, the financial backer for the Myanmar Peace Center. And what did they achieve? Nothing. And I think the reason why I think about Norway is because it's not the first time that Norway gets involved in an ethnic conflict in Asia. They were involved in an absolutely disastrous process in Sri Lanka. And it ended with a bloodbath. And I was actually told by two friends from Oslo, so not some outsiders, that when Norwegian tourists go to Sri Lanka these days, they can't say that we are from Norway.
Right.
Because they will probably end up, with a punch in the face or something like that. So they're actually saying that, oh, we are from Sweden. And I never thought Norwegian would take those words in his mouth that I'm from Sweden. But the Norway's name is that bad in Sri Lanka right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're seeing a similar thing in Myanmar within a couple of years. If Norway... What is
the motive behind? Can we clarify? Can we get a more in-depth analysis on why Norway is so eager to involve in this peace process? Is it that there's a business interest, or what kind of incentive are they having?
Well, it's business interest, of course. We have seen Telenor establish itself in Myanmar. The Norwegian oil companies also go in there and invest and so on.
Right.
But it's also a kind of legacy of the Nobel Peace Prize. They think Norway believes they're the peacemaker of the world.
Right.
They can go anywhere and solve problems. But so far, to the best of my knowledge, they haven't managed to solve a single conflict anywhere in the world. I mean, not in the Middle East, and certainly not in Sri Lanka, and it's not going to happen in Burma either.
But aside from Norway, again, I want to push it again that UN, EU, plus the US and China have a bigger stake in this peace process as well. Because if you look at these ethnic conferences being held last 2-3 years in the ethnic regions in Kachin or Karen states, as well as in Yangon, the ambassador from both countries attending and having talking to both sides and also making comment on this peace process to go ahead. And that's a new dynamic in this peace process. Before one under Nguyen, all that, no foreign powers were involved openly.
Not openly. China was certainly.
Of course.
In the talks between the Communist Party.
Yes.
Now, this is the first time we actually have the whole international community getting involved in the so-called peace process in Burma. But we have to remember this is not the first so-called peace process. The first took place already about a year after Ne Win seized power in 1962, the peace parlor in Yangon at that time, which ended in nothing. And then after that, there's been numerous attempts at establishing some kind of peace talks, all of them to fail, of course. But I think that when you're talking about this whole peace process, as you may use that term, it's very easy to look at the faults that Norway is making, the naivety of the European Union, the United Nations running around not knowing what they're supposed to be doing.
You said United Nations is running around.
They have no idea what they're doing. No.
They don't know what they're doing.
No, it doesn't seem like that. They're totally headless. You're sitting in all these meetings saying stupid things, this about it. It is the representatives of the UN who have been attending these meetings. But the most interesting partner in this whole process is actually China. Mm-hmm. And they are actually outsmarting everybody else. Because they have a strategy.
Seems to me.
They know what they want, and they're playing many different games at the same time. They're not just taking a moral high ground like Norway or doing nothing really like the United Nations. They're, on the one hand, encouraging the peace talks. They're hosting the peace talks. Some of the talks between, no, I'm talking about peace talks here, not the ceasefire thing, when the Kachins came to Rulitashvili in Yunnan, for instance. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, what about the war?
Yeah.
They're armed to the teeth with weapons from China. And this is not the kind of stuff that falls off the back of the truck.
So Chinese are providing arms and weapons to what?
Definitely.
They're one of the biggest ethnic armies in Burma.
Sure. And the surface-to-air missiles, it's which you can shoot down airplanes with. It's even heavy artillery. It's the kind of weapons that all the other ethnic groups in the country could only dream of. And light tanks. They can put them on parade in Pangsang.
And there was rumor even about the helicopters.
Yes, at least 4 helicopters. But these are transport helicopters, not gunships. They would probably be, if they would be used, it would be to evacuate the families or the leaders of the United White State Army to China in the event of a government attack. So I think that's what the helicopters are.
About helicopter, regarding helicopter news, about Jane's Defense Weekly and your report a couple of years ago, and the war leadership, when we talked with them, they completely denied it, they categorically denied it. They said this is a nonsense, and they even took our reporters to show that the use an old helicopter. How do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think it's nonsense. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, they have at least 4 of those helicopters. And 2 of them are near Pangsang, and the other 2 are near Kunma. Kunma is, of course, Pai Wu-chang's hometown. It's obviously for evacuation in case of an emergency. So, no, they are certainly there. But they was also denied that they got any tanks from China. But then they put them on parade in Pangsang with the Wa flags on them.
So Wa and Kogan, they are the wild cards in this peace process or ceasefire process. How the military, the Tamador and Burmese armed forces will tackle? How do you see that the conflict will end with these 2 formidable enemies?
Well, you can see, if you go back to China's general policy here, on the one hand, they put a carrot. They're promising investment, they're putting on the charm offensive, sending hospital ships to Yangon and churches in Kachin State and so on. They got the big stick.
Right.
And that's the United White State Army. Indirectly, Kokang as well. Because Kokang, as a head, doesn't have his own source of weaponry. It's all coming from the UWSA.
But again, recently, if you look at the Kogan conflict, there was a very different, interesting version came from the Burmese army, saying that they are somehow not belong to Burma. But Wa and Kogan are part of official 135.
Of course they are.
Yes. But they are some now Chinese, they are kind of a Chinese or belong to...
Well, the Kokang are ethnic Chinese. Most of the people in Kokang are ethnic Chinese. But it doesn't mean that the Kokang is part of China.
Right.
The border is there, Kokang is way inside Myanmar. And everyone there is a Myanmar citizen, even if they're ethnic Chinese.
But the way that they portray the army, like a attacking against the foreigners, a foreign invasion, namely the Chinese.
It's of course nonsense.
Yeah.
It's part, and they're one of the so-called the 135 national races. Kokang is there, the Wa are there. So there's no discussion about that. But how the army is going to tackle this, it remains to be seen, because they suffered enormously heavy casualties in Kokang. Heavier there than in Kachin State. And the casualties in Kachin State, were extremely heavy as well. So what the army has managed to achieve after almost a year of fighting now, is to secure the Malipa Valley, the valley around Rakhine, the central, the only valley in Kokand really. And that is heavily fortified. They got tanks there. They got helicopter landing pads that you can bring in reinforcements. They got heavy artillery. But all the surrounding mountains are in the hands of the Kokand army, and they don't even dare to go up there.
But it seems to suggest that China will play a bigger role.
Yes. China is the only part...
Because China wants to see, on the other hand, stability along the border area.
Of course, they want stability along the border area, but they don't want to see Myanmar drift into the Western camp, become an ally of the United States.
That's right.
And if you look at it in a much broader perspective like that, of course, this is the main reason why China is playing this double game, the carrot and the stick in Myanmar. Right. But we shouldn't forget either also that what are America's interests in Myanmar? Are we to believe that democracy and human rights are the two most important guiding principles for America's foreign policy? Well, I don't still believe that.
Right.
I think the China card is a bit more important. So, and the fact that President Thein Sein managed to move away from China, open the door to the Americans, that really got Washington on board. Right. And that is why America is so careful. They don't want to criticize the government, no matter what the government does, because they think that then they will push them back into China's embrace.
So too much at stake, seems to me, that there has been a vested strategic interest in Burma.
Absolutely.
And China and U.S. will continue to play a game and will exercise their influence. And that somehow have an implication or positive or negative on this peace process and ceasefire agreement.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I envy the geographic location of your country, because on one hand you got China, you got India, you got Thailand, a US ally, and then the Bay of Bengal. So I mean, you're right there in the, you can say not at the crossroads, but in the crossfire of a lot of conflicting interests in Asia.
Talking about crossfire, I think I want to bring you back to your excellent, one of your articles published in the Ayawadi magazine. You talk about the peace industry, and it was widely read and shared in diplomatic communities in Yangon, and also among the peacemakers, I believed, and donor communities. And you talk about carpetbaggers and comments whose real contribution to the peace process is shrouded in self-laudatory assessments that have no basis in reality.
That's correct.
Is it too harsh?
No.
Why?
I think it was too mild, really.
Really?
I think these people are just opportunists who want to go there and make a name for themselves and make a lot of money and then move on to another conflict zone in Africa or somewhere else. I mean, I don't know how many groups...
Are you suggesting that these peacemakers, whatever self-appointed peacemakers, have no clue about complexity on the ground?
They have no clues. They're totally clueless. Those I met and the reports I read from them show that they're completely clueless. It is very sad because, I mean, it just makes the situation messier, much more difficult to tackle. But if the foreign community wanted to make a contribution to peace in Myanmar, they should not be sending these people who are just, talking about things that they really don't have no understanding about. Because the weakness of this whole process is not only the part of the government, it's also the part of the ethnic groups.
Right.
Because they say that they want to have a federal system.
Right.
I asked them, well, what kind of federal system? And they said, oh, a genuine federal system. But it's not really an answer. I mean, if the foreign community could make any contribution to peace and prosperity in your country, it would be to sit down with these ethnic groups and work out the parameters for a federal system which would be suitable to the specific conditions in Myanmar, that would work and not be a threat to national unity. So the ethnic groups would then have an alternative constitution, really, and say, look, this is the way we want our country to be. And let's talk about this. But in order to do that, then you need foreign expertise. They can come with experiences and from other countries and other federal systems in the world, how they work, the weak point and the strong point. But there the international community can make an enormous contribution. To sit down with these groups and talk about federalism, the way it should be, and in a way that would not be seen as a threat to national unity.
Right. So talking about genuine federal union, before that, I want to go back to these peacemaker or whatever you call it, paid peace mercenaries or whatever you call it. Since they've been paid, we assume that they are well paid.
Yes, they are.
And those donors whom they receive the money from have the vested political interest. They have their own agenda. And can peacemaker be neutral and impartial in that sense?
They can, but the peacemakers in Burma are not neutral and impartial.
Right.
They're definitely on the side of the government, and they're also putting pressure on the ethnic groups to sign an agreement which they don't really want to sign, because they don't want just to see a ceasefire. What they want, and they've been saying this since day one of this whole process, is they want to talk about the future of the country. What kind of country should we live in? Should it be a unitary state or a federal state? They want to have a federal system, but they don't even know what kind of federal system. But that should be the starting point, not the technicalities, the technical details of this ceasefire agreement. Ceasefire is easy. I'm not going to shoot you if you don't shoot at me. Stop. That's all. It could be done in 5 minutes. You don't have to spend a year and a half or 2 years now just talking about that. It's a total waste of time, and they're sidetracking all the main issues.
But also there is a persistent criticism towards ethnic groups about lack of trust, deficiencies of trust, and lack of unity, and also about the business and trade interest in this conflict.
I mean, first of all, we have to remember that ethnic conflicts in Myanmar is not just between the majority Burmans and all the other ethnic groups. It's also between the various ethnic nationalities. The Shan and the Kachin never really liked each other. The Karen and the Shan don't really like each other.
And Shan State alone, there are various groups.
Well, absolutely. I mean, 60% of the population of Shan State is probably Shan, 40% other nationalities, like the whole country. Mm-hmm. But if you ask the Shans, now, what do you think the Pawas would say, live under you?
Right.
And they say, oh, they would be happy. And I would then say, yeah, like you're happy to live under the Burmese, right? No, not like that. Of course, it is exactly the same situation. But these are the complexities one has to understand before you even start talking about peace. And if you want to have a federal system that works, these issues have to be addressed, and addressed now, not after they sign some kind of meaningless agreement about a ceasefire.
So the last question, is there any hope in this peace process where there be a genuine federal union in Myanmar or Burma or the Golden Land in sometime in the future, and the role of the military, because it seems to be sending a very mixed signals towards the demands by the ethnic groups, and government has given I think much more, according to some informed sources, much more decent proposal towards ethnic groups, but a military seems to be taking a much harder stance.
There was a lot of enthusiasm when Wang Min, the main negotiator here from the government side, took the word federalism in his mouth. But actually, one shouldn't be too excited about that either. I mean, people have been talking about federalism and not since it was abolished in 1960.
That's right.
So it's nothing new, really. But the fact that he actually said it made the international community.
It's a taboo word in Burma.
Almost a taboo word. But remember, it is a taboo word in military circles.
That's right.
That's the point.
That's right.
And from what I heard, the military were not happy with Wang Min after he had made that slip of tongue and said the forbidden F word.
Another forbidden F word.
Exactly. Right. In his discussions with the ethnic armed groups. The army sees federalism as a threat, as a first step towards disintegration of the country. Why do you think that? Well, one has to ask them, because the other system, the unitary state, obviously hasn't worked, because we have had a civil war now for 60 years. So something else has to be tried. And I can't see any way out of the country's decades-long problems other than some kind of structure with the interest of all the ethnicities of the country have their rights and where their culture and languages are respected. And that would mean some kind of federal system. Exactly what it would look like, I really don't know, and I have no answer to that question. But that is when the international community could step in and help the country move forward. Not to put pressure on the people to sign an agreement which nobody really likes anyway. That is a destructive approach, and it's not going to lead to peace.
Thank you very much, Bertil.
Thank you.
Thank you.